Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our headlines. China says it will continue to take resolute and forceful countermeasures as US tariffs of 104% kick in. China is set to hold a high-level meeting in response as dozens of nations are hit with fresh US tariffs. European and Asian stocks have plummeted as Trump's new levies come into force. The White House says that up to 70 countries have opened conversation to secure trade deals. China says the US has used blackmail over the Panama Canal as American Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the US will take the canal from Chinese influence. Meanwhile, Beijing has called Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's claims as baseless after the European leader said more Chinese troops were fighting for Russia. It comes as two reported Chinese nationals were captured, allegedly fighting against Kyiv's forces. Meanwhile, Ukraine alleges that Russia has launched a huge drone attack on its eastern regions with fires and injuries reported. This comes as US and Russian officials have announced talks in Istanbul, though the US says Ukraine is not on the agenda. Rescue efforts are continuing following a deadly roof collapse at a club in the capital of the Dominican Republic. At least 100 people have died, including a former baseballer, with hundreds in attendance at a concert. Iran says it is ready to engage with the US on talks over a new nuclear deal only if America stops military threats. Iran's foreign minister says talks with a view to seal a deal could take place on Saturday. Further deadly Israeli strikes have been reported in Gaza this morning as UN humanitarians call for a lifting of aid blockages in the enclave. This comes as UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres described the Gaza Strip as a killing field. China is hitting back after US President Donald Trump's 104% tariff on Chinese imports took effect. At a press briefing, China's foreign ministry called on the US to stop its arrogant and bullying behaviour, urging Washington to adopt a more respectful approach to negotiations. Let's listen in to what Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian had to say.
美方仍在对中国滥施关税，一味地进行极限施压，对这种霸道霸凌行径，中方坚决反对，绝不接受。美方如果真的想通过对话谈判解决问题，就应该拿出平等、尊重、互惠的态度。如果美方置两国和国际社会的利益于不顾，执意打关税战、贸易战，中方必将奉为。
Well, China has vowed to take firm and forceful measures to protect its interests, asserting that its development rights are inviolable. With Trump's tariffs already escalating, Beijing warned it would continue fighting back if the US intensifies economic pressures. Let's listen in to what Lin had to say.
中国人民的正当发展权利不容剥夺，中国的主权、安全、发展利益不容侵犯。我们将继续采取坚决有力的措施，维护自身的正当权益。
The trade war is taking a toll globally, with markets plunging and fears of a recession growing. China's response signals a deepening standoff as both sides dig in for a prolonged conflict. China's state-run Xinhua news agency has reinforced Beijing's call for the US to remove its unilateral tariffs. Citing an official from the Ministry of Commerce, Xinhua emphasised China's commitment to dialogue and cooperation while warning of further countermeasures if necessary. Meanwhile, Spain and Vietnam have announced plans to elevate their diplomatic ties to the highest level, navigating the economic strain caused by sweeping US tariffs. Here's what their leaders have said.
Tất cả các cái vấn đề mà hai nước chúng ta quan tâm, và đặc biệt là tình hình thế giới, khu vực trong cái bối cảnh hiện nay, và khẳng định là càng khó khăn thách thức thì chúng ta càng phải đoàn kết thống nhất, đề cao chủ nghĩa đa phương, kêu gọi cái sự đoàn kết quốc tế, và hai bên đã có cái quan hệ tốt đẹp rồi thì thời gian tới thì càng ngày càng tốt đẹp hơn.
España apuesta por un orden internacional basado en reglas, por el libre comercio y por la apertura económica, y considera que las guerras comerciales no benefician a nadie, sino que perjudican a todos.
In Europe, concerns over economic stability are mounting. Germany's finance minister Jörg Kukies has cautioned that the Eurozone's largest economy risks slipping back into recession as higher tariffs on autos and metal take their toll. In France, the government has unveiled a plan to cut spending by €5 billion in an effort to curb national debt. President Emmanuel Macron has also weighed in on the impact of US tariffs. Here is what he said.
Les choses sont simples. La France, l'Europe n'ont jamais souhaité le chaos ou l'augmentation des tarifs. Nous pensons que c'est une mauvaise idée et une mauvaise réponse aux questions du déficit commerciaux. Nous avons aussi toujours dit que nous défendrions notre économie, et donc si tarifs il y avait, et surtout ils sont à 20%, riposte.
Well, shifting focus from Europe now to Japan, and officials in Tokyo are racing to counter the effect of these new US reciprocal tariffs, which took effect on Wednesday. Japan is also facing a steep 25% levy on auto exports, adding further pressure on its economy. In response, Prime Minister Ishiba Shigeru has appointed Economic Revitalization Minister Akazawa Ryusei as chief negotiator to manage trade discussions with Washington. Akazawa will lead a team of experts across multiple ministries to assess US strategies and explore potential bargaining opportunities. And finally, on the monetary front, central banks in India and New Zealand have announced rate cuts. The Reserve Bank of India has lowered its key interest rate by 25 basis points to 6%, aiming to boost economic activity. Well, Asian stocks are facing a significant downturn today, with fears of a global recession intensifying as President Trump's tariffs take effect. Japan's market suffered a sharp decline, while Hong Kong and South Korea also saw their stocks slip. China, which faces the heaviest tariffs, experienced smaller losses compared to its neighbours, though its market still felt the pressure. Meanwhile, Taiwan's market has entered bear market territory, reflecting growing investor concern. Meanwhile, European stocks are under pressure today, struggling to hold onto the gains from the previous session. Markets had snapped a 4-day losing streak on Tuesday, riding a wave of optimism from Asia-Pacific rebounds. But that momentum quickly faded. Investors are now digesting the broader fallout of President Trump's latest tariff action, with Europe and other US trading partners poised to respond. Well, joining us to discuss the markets further is Ayanaba Banerjee, a correspondent with NewsX World. Ayanaba, thank you very much for joining us. What more can you tell us about the market reactions to this unprecedented action from Donald Trump's administration?
Thank you, Joshua, for having me. Now let's turn to Europe markets. Europe markets have just opened up. Let's start with IBEX 35, which is the benchmark stock market index of Spain. So we can see that IBEX 35 has gone down 2.06%, and the points have gone down 248. The market now stands at 11,820.30 points. If we move on to the next market, which is FTSE market, the Financial Times Stock Exchange of United Kingdom, it now stands at 7,717.80 points. it has gone down 192.73 points from yesterday and has gone down 2.44% from yesterday. So we can see that the European markets are really struggling with the numbers. They are in a constant slump. The markets are going down. Moving on to DAX stock market, which is from Germany. The market currently stands at 19,781.59 points. It has gone down 498.67 points and 2.46% from yesterday. Moving on to CAC 40, which is a benchmark French stock market index. It has gone down 175.15 points, 2.47% from yesterday, and now currently stands at 6,925.98 points. Now, moving on to Asian markets, which we have been covering since the morning. Nikkei 225, which is a stock market index for the Tokyo Stock Exchange, currently stands at 31,714.03 points, which has gone down 1,298.55 points since yesterday, which basically means it has gone down 3.93% since yesterday. Tokyo Stock Exchange is going down. Moving on to Shanghai, it's very important to note that the Shanghai stock market has not gone down so much as compared to other Asian markets, even though the 104% tariff that Trump has implemented has come into effect since today. Still, we can see that the SSE composite index or the stock exchange, Shanghai Stock Exchange, is still trying to compete with the market, and the numbers are still there. It's not slumped yet. It currently is at 3,186.81 points. It actually has gone up 41.26 points, and it has gone up 1.31%. But Nifty 50, which is the National Stock Exchange of India, it has gone down 134 points or 0.59%, and it currently stands at 22,404.95. Meanwhile, in Australia, the ASX 200, which is basically the Australian Securities Exchange, currently stands at 7,375 points. It has gone down 135 points since yesterday, or 1.80% since yesterday. This is all we have for now, Josh. Back to you in the studio.
Yes, thank you, Ayanaba, for providing some more insight there. The market's unstable. We're still waiting to see the impact on the US stock markets as they open later today. But the impact to businesses and consumers is something we will continue to cover here on NewsX World. But we do move on. And Beijing has hit back at the United States after Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth accused China of threatening the Panama Canal's operations. Chinese officials slammed the remarks and said that the US was maliciously attacking China. Let's listen to the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian.
美国的高级官员恶意攻击中国，抹黑破坏中巴合作，再次暴露了美国霸道霸凌的面目。中方对此表示坚决反对。谁想要控制巴拿马运河，世人皆知。美国应该自己照照镜子，看看究竟是谁在威胁他国的主权、安全与发展。
Well, China also called out US actions to undermine China-Panama cooperation. China urged Washington to stop what it called blackmail against Panama. Hegseth, during his visit to Panama, warned the United States will not allow China to disrupt operations at the Panama Canal, a crucial waterway for global trade. He toured the Miraflores locks and met with Panama's President Jose Raul Molino to discuss the American commitment to securing the canal. Hegseth's remarks align with President Trump's previous statements, vowing to reclaim control over the canal from alleged Chinese influence. The US Defense Secretary further pledged to strengthen US-Panama security cooperation as both nations aim to safeguard the waterway's integrity against alleged foreign interference. Let's hear what Pete Hegseth had to say.
Our relationship is growing in part to meet Communist China's rising challenge. China-based companies continue to control critical infrastructure in the canal area. That gives China the potential to conduct surveillance activities across Panama. This makes Panama and the United States less secure, less prosperous, and less sovereign. I want to be very clear. China did not build this canal. China does not operate this canal. And China will not weaponize this canal. We will do this in partnership with Panama. Together, we will take back the Panama Canal from China's influence.
Well, continuing the discussion on these latest developments, we're joined by Gautam Mukherjee, a senior journalist who's joining us from New Delhi. Gautam, thank you very much for being here with us. Before we discuss the comments from both Pete Hegseth and China, I want to get some understanding on the importance of the canal. For our audience, can you explain why the Panama Canal is such a contentious topic in 2025?
Well, the Panama Canal borders the United States, and China has come all the way from the Pacific, thousands of miles away, in order to set up businesses at either end of the canal and dominate the commerce that passes through the canal, which is of great importance. The Panama Canal was built over 38 years by the United States with great loss of life because it was very hazardous to build it in the first place. And it belonged to America till President Carter gave it over to Panama to control. Now, Panama is in no position to take on Chinese diplomacy that wants to dominate. And so they are having to be pushed back by the United States with direct action. BlackRock has bought over, BlackRock is the American investment firm, has bought over two of the Chinese enterprises that were bordering the Panama Canal, and they are determined to expel the Chinese altogether from the environs of the Panama Canal, and rightly so. I mean, China has not only used the Panama Canal to try and dominate the border and snoop on India and South America, but it has also infiltrated via Mexico and Canada, which are both on either border of the United States, to bypass earlier tariffs and to export fentanyl, which is a deadly drug that is killing millions of Americans, into the country from both ends. This is very malefic activity, and at last a president has stood up and decided to do something about China and its behavior.
Yes, Gautam, I want to look at some of the comments from Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth. He said that the US are going to work to make sure that foreign interference isn't involved in the Panama Canal. But can we question the US motive here? Because Donald Trump's openly spoken about the fact that he wants to take control back of the Panama Canal. So why isn't US intervention foreign interference as well?
Well, the Panama Canal is really a bequest from America to Panama for them to earn a livelihood. Otherwise, Panama hasn't got very much going for it, except it is also used as a haven for tax-free companies to be registered there, and the world's dubious have registered tax-free companies there and are routinely becoming embroiled in court cases and investigations from their home countries and in multiple other countries. So Panama is a sunny place for shady people, as the saying goes. And America has every right to dominate it. I don't think they are, considering invading the Panama Canal and taking it over, because the Panamanian leadership has decided to roll over and cooperate with the Americans. If they didn't, then military intervention would have been considered.
Yes, Gautam Mukherjee, we are very, very short on time. Just a quick question on China's comments. They've used the word blackmail. They've said that the US is maliciously attacking China through these comments on the Panama Canal. How do you think this is going to play out over the next coming weeks?
I think China didn't expect such forthright action from the Americans and is becoming increasingly hysterical in the use of its language, both with reference to the tariffs as well as the Panama Canal.
Absolutely. Gautam Mukherjee, thank you as always for joining us. Situations revolving around the Panama Canal is something we will continue to follow here on NewsX World. But we move on now, and at least 100 people have died in the Dominican Republic after a nightclub roof collapse. The tragic incident occurred during a crowded event, leaving many others injured. Among the victims were notable figures such as Nelsie Cruz, the sister of Major League Baseball star Nelson Cruz, and former Major League Baseball pitcher Octavio Dotel. Rescue teams have been working around the clock to find survivors in the rubble. The collapse occurred around midnight during a performance by merengue singer Ruby Perez, who remains unaccounted for. Authorities are investigating the cause, though details on the building's last inspection remain unclear. President Luis Abinadar has expressed his condolences as crowds gathered outside the nightclub anxiously waiting for news of their loved ones. Rescue operations continue as families hold on to hope. Here is what some of the victims' family members have said.
¿Ha sabido algo?
Hay gente que está en la clínica y no la han identificado. Nosotros vamos para allá. Hay un video que sale donde ella está saliendo. Y me dice que hay gente que está en el baño, también atrapado, pero yo sé que ella está bien, yo tengo fe.
Tenemos aquí unas amistades, sobrinas, primas, unos amigas y amigos que estaban en los escombros, que están en los escombros porque aún no están en la lista ni de trasladados al hospital ni de fallecidos. Y esperamos por ellos,
Well, staying with us is Gautam Mukherjee, a senior journalist from New Delhi, to discuss these developments. Gautam, thank you very much for staying with us. Of course, the information that we're getting is still not a full picture, but with over 100 deaths now recorded. How is this incident going to be felt across not just the Dominican Republic, but also across the world, given the sheer level of death that we've seen?
Well, the Dominican Republic is featuring more and more in terms of American tourists, particularly youngsters who go there because it is a party place and much cheaper for them to have a good time. But unfortunately, recently an Indian student, 20 years old, went missing. Till now, we do not know whether she died or whether she was abducted. A roof of a nightclub collapsing like this only goes to show that these places are neither safe nor built properly nor checked. And over 100 people have died, over 160 more are injured, including the performers. It is, a very sad story. You get similar things happening, from Europe. People go to Spain, to Ibiza, and you've had fires and things of this sort over there as well, in what are essentially party places which are none too well configured in terms of their facilities and their construction. The same thing happened also in Bali some time back, where the Australians go because it's very close to them, a 3-hour flight away, similar to Ibiza. And the Dominican Republic is the latest in this trend of places that attract a lot of visitors without looking into their facilities and safety measures.
Yes, Scott and Mukherjee, that is all that we have time for on this discussion. We will, of course, continue to look at the investigations that follow this tragic incident involving hundreds of people in the Dominican Republic. We move on, and China has firmly rejected what it called absolutely groundless claims from Kyiv that a significant number of Chinese citizens are fighting alongside Russian forces in Ukraine. Speaking on behalf of the Foreign Ministry, spokesperson Lin Jian emphasised that China's stance on the Ukraine crisis is clear and has received widespread international support. Let's hear what he said.
这种说法毫无根据。中方在乌克兰危机问题上的立场是清晰的、明确的，得到国际社会的广泛认可。乌方应正确看待中方为政治解决乌克兰危机问题所做的努力和发挥的建设性作用。
Disregard for the rules of international trade. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova expressed concern that Washington's actions signal a departure from established norms in global trade law. She pointed out that the White House's tariff decisions are in violation of fundamental rules within the World Trade Organization. As the US and China continue their trade tensions, Moscow's comments highlight growing concerns about the potential for a full-scale trade war between the two economic powers.
Последние тарифные решения Белого дома, которые идут вразрез или вопреки, нарушают основополагающие правила ВТО, продемонстрировали, что Вашингтон более не считает себя связанным нормами международного торгового.
Well, staying with the United States and Russia, they are set to hold a second round of embassy-focused talks in Istanbul on April the 10th. Officials stress the meeting is strictly about stabilising diplomatic operations with no discussions of political or security issues. Russia will be represented by Ambassador Alexander Darchayev, while the US delegation will be led by Deputy Assistant Secretary Sonata Coulter. Here is what the State's Department spokesperson has said.
On April 10th, U.S. and Russian delegations will meet for a second time in Istanbul to try to make progress on further stabilizing the operations of our bilateral missions. So that is happening in Istanbul. There are no political or security issues on the agenda, and Ukraine is not, absolutely not on the agenda. These talks are solely focused on our embassy operations, not on normalizing a bilateral relationship overall, which can only happen, as we've noted, once there is peace between Russia and Ukraine.
Meanwhile, Russia has reportedly launched 55 drones on Ukraine overnight. Ukraine's Air Force says that 32 were shot down while 8 failed to hit targets. Kharkiv and Dnipro were heavily struck, where 15 have reportedly been injured. Well, strikes ignited fires in Kharkiv, injuring 3 and damaging storage sites. Firefighters have been battling blazes as officials confirmed over 20 hits and multiple explosions. Meanwhile, Russia claims it's pushing the last Ukrainian forces from the western Kursk region. The Defence Ministry released a video of troops raising the Russian flag in Giyevo and conducting house-to-house searches. At the United Nations, acting US Ambassador Dorothy Shea warned Washington has no patience for bad faith negotiations in efforts to end the war. Let's listen in.
This war must end. We will have no patience for bad faith negotiation or violation of commitment.
Meanwhile, NATO chief Mark Rutte says the war's outcome could shape global security, including in Asia. Allies have pledged over $2 billion in support for Ukraine in early 2025, showing firm backing as the conflict enters another critical phase. Let's take a look.
The world is watching the war and its outcome very closely. China is certainly watching. If we allow Putin to use force to achieve his aims, it will not go unnoticed. It's Ukraine today, it could be East Asia tomorrow.
Trump clearly stated that he wants to continue with that policy and maybe even speed it up to pivot more towards Asia. That's totally logical. And also that they want the European and Canadian NATO allies to take more of a burden, share the burden in a more equal,
Well, that is all that we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more of the latest breaking international news.